discussion on regulations that we have before us. Of course, in our last meeting on the 9th, we heard from the public. I got the public comment, and that phase is closed. So now it's our turn. Take the input that was provided both via the email and through the public comment to go to work. So I don't know where we want to start for sure. I made some notes, and I'm sure everyone else did. There were three, actually two main ones that I made note of, and one was of the setbacks, and and the other one is the watershed question, and also the third one was actually the third and probably the first. I'm going to put the first shall be last and last shall be first. The comments made by staff to remove the individual or personal regulations from this document. So I think that probably ought to be our first step in our conversation, and then we can move on to the others as we see fit. Staff, you would just want to recap what you gave to us. I mean, it won't be new information. Just kind of want to recap where we were working. That was paragraph 25-113.
What I had said, the two sections, I guess, if you wanted, that's what I recommended you remove, was removing in its entirety Article 25-113, which is on page 2516, and that has to deal with private solar energy systems. Is all my testimony. I said I don't believe that we need to be in the business of regulating individual solar systems on a person's property. And then the other one had to do with page 2514, number 9, had to do with a portion of the developer's agreement. And I requested that the board remove the groundwater monitoring plan without specific details. I just feel like that leaves everything way wide open, and I think nobody really knows what needs to be discussed or put in place with that. So I feel like those two things should be removed from the regulations.
Okay.
2514-9? Maybe I'm wrong. Oh, I see, okay, I'm with you, okay.
The groundwater
Yeah,
monitoring.
I see it up on top,
Okay,
yeah,
good.
okay.
Up at the top, yeah, sorry.
Kind of towards the top.
Yeah, toward the top.
Down a little bit from the top.
Yeah.
Okay.
From what I'll just kind of start with my opinion on this, on the private solar system requirements. You know, I think if we treat it as an accessory, we are if it is treated as an accessory, then we are doubling down on regulation. Meaning that there will be this set of regulations and an accessory that sets in there. That we're already looking at it as an accessory. I don't believe we need extra. I don't think we need this paragraph 113, my own opinion.
Well, I'll kind of own it because as I recall, I was a little persistent in pursuing this, and, you know, I'm not one who wants to regulate any more than we have to, but I did look back at some of our other material, and we do regulate mobile homes, RVs, shipping containers, and billboards. So when I saw those, I kind of struggled as to how this would be different in terms of providing some protection for neighboring landowners. And I guess the other piece for me is what we heard from the public comments. If any of that is true, we heard about contamination and radiation and glare, and I mean, I don't want to live next to that, if in fact that's true. So I feel somewhat compelled to protect the non-participants, non-participants being someone who doesn't have solar panels on their property. So that's kind of my perspective. I get the kind of the double down impact. If they're treated as accessory structures, that is subject to the same setbacks, and I don't know about the height requirement, where that would come down, but
Russ, could you further explain why you raised this question?
Since the county already has regulations in Article 13 for accessory use, okay, I believe that solar would fall, a private solar would fall under that accessory use regulation or guideline.
And therefore, you're,
Then it would have to abide by the setbacks and right of ways and that type
you're
of thing.
offering as your opinion is that section 25-113, we don't need it at all?
That's correct. I think Article 13 takes care of it, will suffice. That's my opinion.
Let me ask Mark a question. As an accessory, okay, we're saying a 20-foot height. What's the height limit on accessory? 30 foot, isn't it? Something like that, or what?
Yeah, it's 35.
35 foot?
35 for other, like accessory buildings.
So really,
The ag
this article, basically, as I read it, that we're using the same setbacks as an accessory. The only difference is the height limitation.
Right.
So instead of 35 feet, you only got 20 feet.
Yeah.
Other than that, basically, the regulations are the same.
Yeah. Well, and but we currently don't regulate ground mount solar.
Yeah, I understand,
So
but if
that's-
this goes through, we would.
Yes.
But the only difference between those regulations would be the height requirement.
The height.
Setbacks.
Setbacks would be the
Go
same.
get a zoning permit, whatever, so
Yes.
that's the only difference, would be
That's
the
the only
height
difference.
requirement. And,
If we left everything the same, then yeah, you got 35-foot tall
yeah,
panel.
So Russ, when I asked the question, I understood and I was agreeing with you, but I wanted to make sure I wasn't agreeing with something I shouldn't agree with. So I agree with you on this. It would be doubling down on setting in some regulations that we don't need. We already have them.
So by doubling down, you're saying that they're already covered as an accessory use?
Yes.
Is that the staff agreement?
How does that, can you explain that?
I'd have to really disagree, I think.
Okay.
Okay, see, that's what 'cause
Yeah.
it sounds like what you're saying is different than,
Because we wouldn't have needed it at all, really, if it was already listed in a permitted accessory use. We could have just left out a lot of these bullet points here and just put in a more restrictive height requirement here. And so a solar panel in a residential district is not listed, but we have never regulated it because of the fact that it's not listed. So by putting it in this regulation, now we're gonna start regulating it. I just put it in as an accessory use to make it super clear to everyone that a solar panel is permitted on a residential property as an accessory use. You know, it'd be like similar of
It wouldn't be an
doing a
accessory
carport.
building.
Not, yeah,
Accessory
well, it's lumped in that same category as an accessory building, a carport, you know. like a
Well, it is
gazebo.
now, per these regs, if it is, but if we can do away with this, then there's no regulation at all on it.
Correct. If you did away with it,
You can make it 100 feet tall and put it right on the property line. There's no setbacks at all. Is that correct?
you could put it on you could make it that tall, yeah.
That goes back to Garth's point then, is why he's doing it, is to provide some protection to the
Provide something, at least
landowners.
have a height restriction, have a minimal setback at least.
Exactly. Which, you know, I kind of agree with Garth on that. I mean, I think, you know, there needs to be, if it's not gonna be listed as an accessory structure and subject to those setbacks and height requirements, then, you know, maybe we need to, you know, leave this in there or amend the other code to add it, you know, whatever, whatever you think is easiest.
We list it, we can, by doing that, we'll list it as an accessory use. See, right now, we weren't admitting that, and so right now.
If it's left in, it will be listed as an accessory
As an
use.
yeah.
If this-
Under
This is
under
taken-
this article.
If this is taken out, it
Not
is-
in the accessory use category, which is Article 15, I believe.
So we'd have to amend Article 15 to include it. if
To
we want
include
do
that.
this, do away with this, but still keep it as an accessory.
Yeah,
Like,
right.
yeah. So,
I could go with that.
what's involved in amending Article 15?
Another
Public hearing.
Another public hearing, another, notice in the paper, notice to
We're
cities.
gonna go through this whole process again, just to amend that as an accessory use. We've
Yes.
already done that, we've got this, we can leave
Yes.
it in and take the problems taken care of.
Right.
Yeah.
This is really not gonna stop anybody from doing anything other than being over 20 feet tall.
Right.
Or closer than 20 feet,
20 feet, 10 foot.
yeah, or whatever the setback is in
Depending
that
on where
particular
Yeah,
zone.
where it's located on the property.
Right. Yeah, it's gonna be permitted. An accessory use is permitted on the property. It's just clarifying it in this regulation that you have a height restriction and you gotta get a permit. Before, you didn't have to get a permit for
Yeah,
it.
Bottom line, right now, you do not,
Right now, you do not.
even in the zoned area.
Correct.
Correct.
That's the way I understood it.
What does it do to,
Here's a piece, it is a small, very small piece, but it is a piece. This would include, let's just use a cow-calf operation. They're wanting to develop a better water source in their pasture, and they poke a well and they put a solar panel on it. If we have that in there, they have to go through this.
No, it's exempt.
No, but it's exempt,
There's
there's
ag
agriculture.
exemption
Okay?
in there.
Maybe.
Maybe, that's what it says right here. Upon receiving approval zoning permit, the agricultural exemption permit, no fees will be charged, so,
Okay.
yeah.
It still has
They'd still
to,
have to get a
it
permit.
still has to come through Mark's office.
Come
Yeah.
through me. Correct, yeah, that might be a better way of saying it.
Zoning permit and then also.
Still has to come through me, still has to have a no-fee zoning permit, an agricultural exemption permit, and what that does is that puts it on record of what the purpose of that solar panel is gonna be for. If it's gonna be used for an agricultural well, it still puts it on record what that's used for. We do it right now for ag accessory buildings, or any type of ag building. There's no fees involved, but we still put it on record that the building is used for that purpose.
well, that's kind of where my question was headed. Reno County follows trends from around the country. solar generation is going this way, and I don't know what the capacity is of your office to, or what the time required is to issue a permit. You know, if you suddenly start getting more permits for private solar, have we created some, well, we certainly would create more work for somebody. I just don't know if it fits into the current capacity, or, you know, if this is gonna create a need to add more staff, or.
Well, that's his worry and my problem, if that comes to that.
Yeah, my example probably would not be the influx that, I mean, they wouldn't be lining at the door on Monday morning waiting to get this all done. That's probably not the volume I'm talking about. I'm just thinking of what steps we're gonna be putting in place, thinking of, and I'm dragging up old bones a little bit here, but how many buildings have we approved after the fact that have already, foundations have been poured?
Yeah.
You know, why should we have a regulation in place that might create that catch again?
We've also had some buildings that foundations are set, posts are set or whatever that we've turned down. They've had to pull them out and redo them.
Right. I'm
I mean,
not
it just
not
depends
arguing.
on how egregious they are.
I just think, I don't know, I'm just thinking the private piece of that, we just need to get out of it.
To answer your question, Gar, it would not be any harder for me to issue a permit for that than it would be for me to issue a permit for a large commercial building or somebody's house. You know, I would surmise it'd be more difficult for the property owner to give me a site plan and fill out the permit and pay the fee versus me to sign my name on a permit saying this is okay, because you gotta remember, no building codes in the county, so all I'm doing is really checking the height, checking the setbacks, and checking the floodplain, and if you qualify for all that, you're getting a permit, and I can turn that around pretty much the same day. You know, so, and I do the same thing for every permit, so, yeah, there'll be some maybe additional permits and stuff, but it'd be a little more difficult for the person to now have to apply for a permit versus me just reviewing those three basic things. You know, because all I'm looking at is Article 13 in the regulations, and so that's not hard, that's height and setbacks.
I think what Garth meant though is like if they get really popular, how many private ones will come in wanting a permit, because they're gonna be, you know, they're gonna sell them in Yoder. Already got one out there advertised, so.
Yeah, I mean, it could be an increase in permits, but yeah, but it's, you know, and just having that time to review it, but it shouldn't be that big of a deal, but like you say, that's for Don to worry about.
Transference, Don. You said Don or Mark, he said Don.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, maybe an idea, maybe not a good one, just leave out line 3.
Leave it out.
Yeah,
So they don't have to get a zoning permit?
yeah. They don't have to get one to put it on the roof.
No.
If you take out line 3.
That just makes it ineffective.
That,
Just make it
you
worse.
you might as well take out 1 through 6.
Well, I didn't say it was a good idea. I just-
Yes, a thought that entered my mind is our charge was from the commissioners, was to develop a commercial set of regulations. And well, all of a sudden, we jump in there and we did that, and I think we did a good job of that. And all of a sudden, we're talking about private. And it seemed to me like that leads me back to saying, I agree with you, Russ, just that whole section was starting to disappear. That need to be there. We weren't charged with that responsibility because private solar is already covered.
It's not. There are no regulations on private solar.
It's covered by saying there's not any regulations, so in a sense.
I understand what you're saying, Harley, but, you know, and that's during the process of doing the commercial solar thing, somehow it came up, well, what about private solar? You know, do we need, while we're making these regulations related to solar energy, do we need to do anything as it relates to individual systems, our personal systems? Because now's the time to do it, seeing how we're making the regulations concerning solar energy. So it's better to do it now than to wait and say, well, you know, a year from now, say, well, we should have put personal stuff in there. Now we can't, so we gotta go over and do this whole process all over, write the regs, hold a hearing, you know, and all this kind of stuff. So that's kind of, I think, one of the reasons we tried to put that in now, to avoid having to go through this big lengthy process again. You know, if down the road we decided to do something more with individual solar.
Were there any public comments that addressed the private piece?
I didn't hear
I
any.
never saw
I don't
it.
remember
No.
that.
You know.
I guess on the one hand, I don't necessarily share the same fear that we're gonna have an epidemic of 100-foot tall ground-mounted solar panels in every neighborhood. But at the same time, if we want to include any kind of private solar regs, and we're only talking about ground mount ones that are non-ag, so really this is a pretty small incremental change in the scheme of things, I think. So if we do have that concern, I don't think this is gonna be a deal breaker for anybody, is it? To include.
I mean, you know, the zone area, you know, includes a lot of rural land, which, you know, who cares where it's located if you're out on a
Right.
farm, but you also get some areas where they have little subdivisions and stuff, and you have
Right.
a neighbor who, you know, if he wants to put one right on the fence line and that blocks your view of the lake or something, then you're gonna be, you know, unhappy about that. You know, whereas moving 10 feet in, I don't know, at least there's some provision for that.
8 feet.
8 feet, whatever.
8 feet is the setback from,
Okay.
so I don't know that 8 feet's gonna make a whole lot of
Well,
difference.
that's what, I'm not sure this makes a whole lot of difference otherwise, outside of a potential paperwork workload.
Yeah. Revenue stream.
Well, I think everybody, citizens all believe they can put up solar anywhere they want to, in the city, outside the city, in the county, or anywhere. And all of a sudden, we're going to create ourselves a nightmare if we start any sort of regulation on private solar. And so that would be part of my argument about why we ought to just take that section 113 out. Doesn't need to be there.
Any other discussion? Gail, you've been pretty quiet over there on that end.
He's trying to draw you into the frame.
That's like, I'll drag you into the fight, whether you want to be in it or not.
Well, I understand the setback. If it's right on a property line, I totally understand. I don't know if anybody would want that necessarily if you're right next to each other. I mean, we hope everybody's a good neighbor, but not everybody always is. So.
Can we say something, I mean, what I've heard is, okay, this does not fit as an accessory. Is that correct?
I think it can be considered a type of accessory use on a property, so.
Yeah, the problem, I think, is that it's not part of the Article 13
Yeah.
definition
Well-
of an accessory.
Right.
Article 15.
15, whatever.
Right.
And so the only way it's being treated as an accessory is through this provision. So if we take this out, then it's not treated as an accessory, therefore there are no regulations, they can put it wherever they want.
Well, where I was trying to think to was if we can by association say this private solar shall be treated as an accessory.
By taking that article
Well,
out.
just by making a statement like that as part of 25-113, because, well, I tend to agree with Russ's original statement that it feels a little bit like doubling down. But that accessory definition doesn't include this, so can we sort of back into it and say, well, yes, this is a private solar shall be treated as an accessory and just leave it at that?
That's what that, isn't that what that first?
That's what the first thing
Number
does.
one
Yeah.
states.
But the only difference there being, I mean, the rest of that article, it's not gonna change anything other than the height requirement, where we got a 20-foot height here, and it's 35 feet or whatever in the accessory use. The rest of it would still apply from Article 15, right, Mark? You still have to get a zoning permit,
Yeah.
you know, if ag, you still gotta get a zoning permit and then an ag exemption, and, you know. So the only thing we need is the ground-mounted solar systems can be permitted as an accessory use, comply with minimum, setbacks in Article 13, fine. You know, that means that it's gonna be treated as an accessory under Article 15, and the height requirement in Article 15 would apply if we took away the rest of the verbiage. So it'd be 35 feet high instead of 20 feet.
So that's kind of the compromise.
Other than that, it's all the same, I think.
Yeah. Numbers 3 and 4 are implied. I mean, if you strike those, it probably doesn't hurt it. It's implied that, yes, you need to get a permit, and yes, if you're exempt, you have to fill out those applications. Leaving them in just makes it super clear, for lack of a better term, to everyone that, oh, I do need to have a permit. Oh, yes, I need to fill out an ag exemption.
I'm just reading on Article 15 here. In District R1, rural residential, and R2, suburban residential, there is solar collectors listed already in
Solar
the,
collectors?
yes. So, I mean, we're going, it's a stretch to
Yeah.
bring this to what this is, but I don't know, how, to the letter of solar collector, what are we looking
What
at
does that
there?
mean? That's why, yeah. And that's why I.
So is that
know what
already,
means.
so is that already in our, I mean, if it was R1 or R2,
What's a
are
solar
we already,
Yeah. See, that's why, what is a solar collector, because that's not defined.
Yeah, I mean, is it active or passive or what,
Sounds like we got a deeper issue.
So,
We have some that was old verbiage that
So
didn't
I-
anticipate the stuff we've got today.
I guess that furthers my argument that we probably need to let this lay for right now on the commercial. And that if we put that on the list for staff for a future project. That's my recommendation.
Is that in the R2? Is that?
Yes. I'm on page 15-14.
It's an R1, I think it is.
R1 and R2. Under accessory, it's actually 15 paragraph, or subsection 15-109. Accessory use is allowed, and then
Page
it,
1513.
then that moves over to
15-13.
15-14, actually, that in District R1 and R2, R3, B1s, that's all inclusive. I was just kind of abbreviating. Accessory buildings and uses commonly associated with residential activity, including but not limited to the following, and the list goes on, and then solar collectors. and
So you
all that.
just redefine a solar collector as a solar
So, yes,
Panel.
solar, that's correct.
And it's covered.
Yep. So I don't know what that'll take, but I think that's why that's a piece of why I'm saying, hey, let's pause on this, taking it off of this document, and that's a future project.
And as you know now, I second that idea, leaving that out.
Well, I certainly don't want to discourage personal development of solar energy, but it does sound like we've got a few loose ends that need to be tied up. And as long as you take the oath, Mr. Chairman, to put this on our list,
I think Mark has already scribbled it down.
because I do think it needs some attention.
Yep, I agree completely. With that, solar, just the verbiage solar collectors is very vague, and we need probably some little bit different definition there, and maybe what the intent is there a little bit. We need to have a different, maybe this conversation comes into that, but I think for what we have in front of us, that's why I say we need to pull away and concentrate on the commercial.
So I can probably get okay with delaying this, but I am perplexed about mobile homes and RVs and billboards and shipping containers, why we regulate those and not some other things. I don't know the history of how that got into the code, but I just find it interesting.
Some of
Topic
it,
for another day, maybe.
some of it, yeah, that is a topic for a different day. Some of that is that when the list was made, it probably was not a topic of conversation. As we develop and as we move forward, we add to the list. That's gonna be my best guess, my best answer for it right now. So, I think we're ready for a motion to remove or to keep as written. So Chair will entertain.
Mr. Chairman, I so move such that Article 25-113 not be part of Article 25.
Motion has been made.
Second.
Motion has been seconded. Is there any discussion on that motion? Staff, will you call the roll on that motion?
Schwartz-Fager,
And this is to remove it?
Yes.
to remove it completely.
Okay. No.
Strand,
No.
Schaefer,
Yes.
Seltzer. No. Macklin,
Yes,
Martin,
No.
Gertson.
Yes.
Motion failed.
Okay. So we'll keep it in as written. Next piece of the puzzle that we had was on page 2514 of the solar regulations. Article 9, it was recommended that we staff that we remove Article 9, where a groundwater monitoring plan may be developed. Details of the plan will be in the developer's agreement. And for some conversation there.
I understand the desire to remove it because it is very vague. I don't want to remove the importance, I think, of the intent of that provision. You know, I guess there's some way you need to look at, is there a way to make that less vague? You know, that it's going to be, you know, defined in the development agreement, so basically the developer and the county commission have to hash it out. So we've just pushed all that over to the county commission, said we'll figure it out.
Even when we did the wind, there was a lot of things that had to be developed between the county and the developer. And to write a regulation to cover every one of those things up front seems almost an impossible task.
And that's what this is just putting it over in the development plan, which, you know, maybe that's, I don't object to that being in there. And I guess, you know, I don't know if maybe we need to add a little more definition to our intent to give them some guidance as to what we're looking for. I don't know. You know, like I said, to me, I understand that it is vague. And
Are you saying that we need to put in there maybe what they'd be looking for, or such as the heavy metal type side of it, or?
I'm not sure, Gayla, what I'm really talking about, other than I know it's vague. I know what the original intent was to
Right, yeah.
somehow have some water tests done, you know, prior to the installation of the panels, and then periodically, I think, have water tests done to compare to that initial test to make sure there are no changes in it. That was my understanding of what they were talking about, to make sure there was nothing leaching down through the soil into the water that was possibly coming from that solar field.
What, it does seem counterintuitive, since this is in the Cheney watershed, to not somehow bring groundwater into the discussion. But it is a Pandora's box, because just because you're testing and just because something shows up, then you have to prove where
it came from.
the source of that, and it is pretty murky.
Most of this is all ag land, and, you know, you don't know what, you know, herbicides, pesticides, chemicals being applied to the ground around the solar site. So, I mean, it's tough.
But it is good to get a base level maybe to go off of, I think, because if you don't have that base level and then something was to show up, that gives you a point of when it could have possibly came in.
Yeah, I know, they've had that issue with grain elevators, and they managed to trace the pollution back to the grain elevators, and, you know, had to work through remediation on those things, and dry cleaning establishments and stuff like that.
Was there anything in the letter from Wichita or Sedgwick County? Where that came from?
City of Wichita, wasn't it? Water
Wichita,
works.
City of Wichita.
Yeah.
I think, generally speaking, it looked like most of their proposed provisions revolved around runoff and erosion control. I don't see anything specifically related to groundwater monitoring.
I don't know if some could have thought that maybe that was included in that comment of water, whether's water to, some people, like, if you test for groundwater, does that mean taking a sample of the water that's coming out of the ground or the water that's in the lake? Or, water tests are pulled several different ways. It's not just a one-shot thing.
Well, in order to take a water test, you gotta get down to the water.
Yeah, right, but
Either you gotta have, a source of water nearby, or you have to start drilling wells.
but isn't that kind of Wichita's concern, is that the water quality could be in jeopardy? And so you're kind of shutting that off as a possibility for them to find out where it's coming from. If you say no plan needs to be developed.
I think someone can correct me if I'm reading this wrong, because that very well could be. But as I read it, it looks like their primary concern is more runoff and sediment related. And less as far, there was one little mention about a plan for managing industrial pollutants that may be generated. But it looks like the majority of their suggested provisions are related to, stormwater management, which I think is reasonable with any large-scale project. But I don't know that that is necessarily addressed in a groundwater monitoring plan.
Is it bad to assume that the City of Wichita Public Works does monitor water quality in Cheney Lake already? And they might already have baseline information on the water? They don't say that.
Assuming they probably
They
do.
would have to have some sort of baseline so they know how to treat it so people can consume it. Whether they, drop a vial in the middle of the reservoir or whether they pull a sample out of a spigot at their water treatment facility prior to any action they'd put on it. Don't know where that takes place.
And when I lived in Wichita, and I visited that water plant a lot as part of the professional engineering design of Bloomington, I know that the city City of Wichita monitors that closely, and they blend Equismed water with lake water to get the quality of water that they want. And the other thing they always pointed to, the bakeries and things of that sort, they want an exact quality of water that they're making bread and things of that sort with, food products.
So
They have two sources of water in Wichita. One is the Equismed that comes up quite a ways north of the city, up in the area of Halstead and places of that sort. And they blend to get the quality of water they want between lake water and
Is there not coming into Cheney Water, or into the Cheney Lake, several streams that would be running off, or several sources of runoff that would be coming out of the Cheney watershed area that would have panels on them if they did a water sample test over here and a periodic one, and it said, no, there's no pollutants coming here. If they did one over here, they would know where to look if it was positive. Does that make sense, that it has more than one tributary coming into it as a source that could be pollution?
Primary tributary is the Nescaw.
But there are other places
There
that
are other
will run
creeks.
off when
Yeah,
it
there are other,
rains
yeah, there's
heavy.
other, places where they have
So,
runoff.
so are we wanting to define this plan for the commissioners? Is that what I'm hearing? If that's
I
the case,
guess
then
I-
then we gotta get we've got a lot of homework ahead of us.
It gets complicated
We,
fast.
then in that case, there are, yeah. We're, and our hands are tied.
So if we
okay?
take it out, does that mean that we're not going to look at it, or this is just a suggestion to the commissioners of what might be important, right? So if we take it out,
And actually, this is not a shall be developed, it's a may be developed.
Right.
So it's something that is at their discretion. If they want to,
Yes.
they can do it. If they don't want to, they don't have to.
I just hate to see it removed because of the fact that I want it to be there, so it's at least a suggestion, maybe.
Be a
They can
bullet
discuss
point.
it. If they don't like it, they can throw it out.
It can be a bullet point in their checklist, and they can decide whether they want to pursue it or not.
Right.
The reason I made my comment is if we were going to determine what that plan looked like, we're on our own.
Yeah.
I mean, we cannot take any, I mean, individually, I can go and ask Mark, using Mark as an example of an outside person, for some input on it, but our public hearing is closed, so
Right.
they're in any input, if we were looking for input for a groundwater monitoring plan, we're doing all
Yes.
we're down to boots on the ground in
But we're
research.
talking about removing it right now.
Yeah, so
And
I
I'm
just gotta
just trying to make a point of why I don't think it ought to be removed.
Nope, I just want to be very careful on where we get into definitions and that type of thing.
Yeah. So right now, it's very general, and it's a may be included
Yeah.
instead of a shall be included.
Yep,
So
correct.
it's something that the county commission can do what they want with.
Right.
If they don't feel it's needed, then they can bypass it. If they want to, then they can figure out what kind of a plan, work with the developer on that.
Or a developer may voluntarily offer
Some plan.
to do it just from a defensive.
Yeah, from no protection.
Comments on that?
I think that my impression is that particular language got in there because we monitored other plans, and other plans wasn't necessarily in a drainage area into a public water supply. And it wound up in there, and the word may went in there. And I would have probably argued if we'd wanted to put the word shall be developed in there. I would have argued against that. So I like the language as it is. It leaves up to the county and the developer whether or not they take it.
Built-in flexibility a little bit.
So in other words, no harm, no foul, leaving it in.
Okay, any more discussion on that? Chair will entertain a motion.
Chairman, I would move that we retain the provisions of whatever that is, Article 9 of section 25-110 as a part of the regulations.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Staff, please call the roll.
Short
So, just to be sure,
We're keeping it in.
yes keeps it in?
Yes.
Motion is to retain or keep it in the regulations.
Yes, yes keeps, no strikes.
Okay, yes.
Strand. Yes. Schaefer.
Yes.
Seltzer.
Yes.
Macklin.
Yes.
Martin.
Yes.
Gertson.
Yes. Okay, this is written.
Got the easy stuff out of the way.
Yeah. Next on the list was that I had on my list, and maybe your notes reflected, maybe they don't, my notes reflected one of the topics was setbacks.
Yeah, I think a lot of the comments were they wanted, of course, they always want greater setbacks than what we have. And of course, I think NextEra wants lesser setbacks than what we proposed. But the main difference, I think, being is they would like to see setbacks from the property lines rather than from the primary building. It's kind of the consensus, I think, of what I heard a lot of the verbiage about setbacks is they wanted to go from property lines. And the more I think about that, the more I tend to kind of agree with that.
Mark, can you enlighten us on the nuances of setback from property line versus setback from primary structure?
Nuances, I guess. Well, I'm trying to understand what you, I mean, when we issue permits for buildings, houses, whatever, everything is based off of property lines. Usually, you want these types of structures, far away from your principal building or your house, and so I think that's something typical that you find. Some regulations will take it to the property line. I think you just got to keep in mind, other people's property rights too. Because when you do that, you're setting it away from their property line as well. So I don't know if I answered your question because I don't know if I completely understand what you mean by nuances or so.
Well,
Were you saying,
Don has
what would be the difference, or what could be the difference in that number?
no,
Primary residence versus property line?
I understand that part, I just don't know. It's easier for me to think about setbacks from property lines than setbacks from an object that's going to, depending on the property, is a moving target. So, from somebody who's trying to plan this project, property lines, for me, would be easier to work with, not that we have to have that as one of our goals, but, every property is potentially different as far as the 500 feet to a primary structure.
Yeah, to me, going to the property lines provides the non-participating property owner, some protections of the use of his property. Because, if you go from the building, the building can be on the north side of the property and the project's on the south side of the property. And You know, maybe there's more than 500 feet right there, so they could build right up to the fence line almost, except for other provisions. You know, what if the non-participating owner then wanted to do anything over on the south side? You'd be contending with the impact of those panels sitting right there. Whereas if you go from the property line, then there's a defined different distance, you know, all the way around that he's protected.
Don't we already have 100 feet from all property lines?
I was just reading that exact
So
same thing.
so the principal building is an additional protection
Yes.
beyond our standard setback that we already have.
Right. So, yeah, so I mean, it could be as close as 100 feet, but if we went from the other way, if we went 500 feet on a non-participating owner's property line, you know, then they have that kind of a buffer. I mean, which is the distance between, 3 sets of telephone poles, it's a tenth of a mile.
So let's just use R1 as an example. Agricultural is 30 feet from, a primary building could be as close as 30 feet, both side yard and rear yard. Okay, rural residential, a primary structure, principal building, could be as close to, as 10 feet to the side yard or 20 to the rear.
Correct.
All right, so if we do, let's just use, I like playing with numbers, it's a starting point, so let's just say just for argument's sake, we strike the 500 feet from non-participating landowner, principal building, and we keep the 100 feet from any property lines in effect. Just that action right there would put a solar panel closer, with the regulations we have now, would put solar panels closer than if we would keep that 500-foot measurement in. To that principal building.
Not necessarily, it depends on the location of the building.
Well, yeah, it does.
Yeah.
That's why we have that 500 feet to protect that building.
Right.
So if
Exactly.
that building, let's just say that principal building is set, I mean, right at, let's use the R1 again.
30 feet from the
If
property
they're
line.
setting right on the side yard at 10 feet. They have a 10-feet walkway between their border and their building. And their rear yard, they have 20 feet. Okay? So with that, they have 500 feet from the nearest corner, is the way I interpret it, would be the closest solar panel.
Right.
What if they,
So if we take that 500 feet out and just leave that 100 feet from property lines, now that number is up for debate, but we'll talk about that in a bit, but let's leave it the way it's written now. Let's strike the 500 feet from the principal building and leave that 100 feet in there. Those panels could be 120 feet away from that principal building.
Right.
They could.
what if in the
So
future?
that's just for perspective here.
But, yeah,
Okay.
like I said, it depends upon the location of the building.
What if
It does.
a family wants to come home and the kids say, want to come and build their house next to their parents or in their property? And then, or they want to chunk off part of that land in the future, and does that devalue that ground then? Because there's, say, solar panels close to where they could be building their house?
It's a good question for staff.
I can't answer the devalue question, that's up for debate, but what I can say is
Well,
that wouldn't apply to a new parcel or a new house being built.
it would be
not apply.
closer.
Yeah, it could be closer.
close,
We're
yeah.
talking about things that are in existing at the time that the permit was pulled.
I guess what I'm saying is if it was the property line, then it's a defined amount of distance versus the house.
Right.
But we
Or
are,
principal building
right, but we already have the defined from a property line.
Of 100 feet.
of 100 feet, yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
But I guess I got from them, the people speaking, that 100 feet wasn't enough. They were thinking 500 feet.
Well, the 500 feet is from a non-participating landowner's building, whereas the 100-foot that applies to anybody and everybody, including participating. So there's a little bit of difference on who, road right-of-ways and property lines, the participating owner, they can waive that if they choose to. They could, say, well, I don't care, you can put it right up to the property line. But the non-participating owner, what we did is put in the provision to give them a buffer to, give them, the enjoyment of their land and the use of it. And so now the point is, where's that, do you do it from the building, which is it can be at various locations on a piece of property, or do you do it from the property line, which makes it very clear cut? You don't have to get out and start running across somebody's yard with a tape measure. You can just go to the prop fence line and say, okay, 500 feet from there, that's where the project starts. And with the scale that, is being batted around, the size of the projects, 500 feet is nothing,
So you're saying that you keep that paragraph A in there?
Yes, keep A in there, and then
You're proposing instead of landowner's principal building, you want to say 500 feet from non-participating landowner's property line?
Yes.
This 500 feet, is that really necessary everywhere, though? If you have a section of farm ground and it's broken up into 80s, that means every parcel is going to have a 1/10 of a mile buffer around it,
Well, it depends on
where
where-
nothing can be done.
Depends on where the project is. And if you're a non-participating landowner, you have the same concern on all parcels.
Well, if you're farming, though, if you're a producer and you just have soybeans,
Yeah.
that's not really the same kind of concern as, someone with a house.
You never know.
But like he said, at the same time, when you're talking on commercial scale, it could be 8,000 acres, 1/10 of a mile is nothing.
1/10 of a mile around every parcel is still a 1/10 of a mile.
It's not around every parcel, though. You're just looking around the non-participating.
Wait, no,
owner's parcel.
no, number 8, well, a participating can waive.
Yeah, they can
choose
waive
if
it.
they want
Yeah,
to.
they can waive it. So, if you're participating, you can put it right up into the fence line of your ground if you're in the middle of a bunch of participating owners. So it's only to protect the non-participating owners.
Just for clarity, a participating could never put it on their property line if their property line adjoined a non-participating.
Yes, correct.
Because you say that
But
they
if
could.
he
put it
has
on-
multiple parcels, the participating owner has multiple participating parcels, then he could waive that 100-foot setback on the adjoining participating
Yeah,
parcels.
if two non-participating parcels join, then they could waive that.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it just provides the non-participating
Two participating.
person, some protection around his ground. And, the odds are it's just gonna be on one side of his ground anyway.
Right.
Yeah, let me
Right, but
These developments are generally set out in a big square or rectangle or something.
Right, but so if one specific owner has an issue, though, we have a provision where we can ask for additional setback through a conditional use permit process, but whatever we set here is gonna be the minimum. And I don't know that the minimum is a requirement in 100% of cases. Otherwise, you're taking 1/10 of a mile of someone's land.
You're not taking it.
You're preventing them from using it as they see
They
fit.
can still plant crops in it if they want it.
Boy, oof,
Yeah.
that'd be a tough pull.
I need to clarify what I said. When two participating join each other, they can waive it, not
Right,
non-participating.
but non-participating,
Correct.
no.
Two
Yeah.
participating.
They could build right across the property line.
Right,
That's the intent.
that's the intent of it, yes.
Right.
But a non-participating couldn't, even if they don't care.
We're
Correct?
gonna waive it.
Yeah.
I don't, we
Well,
don't,
not the way it's written.
Not the way it's written.
not the way it's written,
No
no.
waiver.
always had a provision to allow the non-participating property owner, the right to waive that 500-foot setback. That would make it their choice. They would have it if they wanted it. If they didn't care, said, well, I'll keep it 100 feet from me, that's fine. Then they could, the utility company could enter an agreement with him to do that. So we could amend that to allow the non-participating property owner the right to waive that setback.
I think another thing to consider is if we're talking about panels or if we're talking about a building full of batteries.
But you don't necessarily know where things are gonna be until you get a site plan.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, we don't.
So when we did a conditional use permit, we could say their storage building needs to be, their battery storage building needs to be 1,200 feet from the property line. I mean, we've seen pictures of cars that are on fire.
We could encourage
I'd hate to see a picture of a building full of batteries on fire. But that could be handled with a conditional use permit, so I guess.
From what I'm hearing,
We do have a provision in there on battery storage shall not be located within 500 feet of any principal building.
so it's the same.
So it's the
verbiage.
same verbiage.
Yeah. 500 feet's not far enough.
But we still reserve the right during a conditional use permit process to
To move that.
move that.
Yeah, I would, me personally, I would not move the battery, I would not touch the battery storage for right now, and we deal with that on a case-by-case basis. That'd be how I would handle it. I'm not arguing that 500 feet isn't far enough.
Yeah.
But I think that's something that we need to talk about in a, if we're in that conditional use conversation.
Why?
Why?
Why? Why not put it in the regulations? If we're sitting here saying we don't think it's far enough, so let's increase it.
If we tell them up front that they can plan.
Yeah, they
for
can
that.
plan that.
Principal building could be any building.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to necessarily be a house.
Well, that's where we go back to, if we go back to the property lines, we have more of a definition of where you're going from.
Yeah.
I mean, I would
Here's
choose
where I'm
this
at.
too.
I'm not comfortable with 500 feet from the property line. I think,
I think if there's a specific case where we need a 500-foot setback, we can do that when that project arrives. But I think as a blanket statement, I think that, I'm not comfortable with that either.
Say that again, Russ?
changing that paragraph B to read 500 feet from a non-participating landowner's property line. I'm not comfortable with that 500 feet.
You think it's too much?
I think it's a little excessive
From the property line,
from the property line.
but you're all right with it as from the principal building.
Yeah. Yep. I draw pictures. Here's Russ Gertson's place. We're 500 feet, 700 feet. My house sits right here. We're about, give or take 100 feet from the road. Okay, there's roads, there's right here. Give or take maybe, 300 feet to this border.
Okay.
All right, 500 feet from a principal building.
Be 200 feet this side of it.
okay?
Yeah.
So I would have, there would be 200 feet here,
Right.
here would be 400 feet. This is probably, oh, shoot, I don't even know, it's probably closer to 500 here. This is probably closer to 150 here. So we're gonna be 350 here, the way they're written now, okay?
You'd be 100 feet over on
And we'd
that side.
be 100 feet this way.
Yeah.
And what don't you like
It's-
about the 500?
This is as it's written, this example is as it's written from a principal building. Now, take out all these. Now, we just went from this line here. Now it's 500, 500, 500, and 500 from this border here.
That's if your house is in the middle, basically.
Yeah.
My-
But that matter where your house is.
But it
Yeah.
isn't, but
The
I'm
principal
just using this as an example, because I can wrap my head around it. Because I don't know where
Yeah.
Jack's house sits on his lot, I kinda know where Garth's does, but I haven't stepped it off, so I don't know. But, I'm using this as, to get my head around it. So am I a typical landowner? I'm a rural residential. Okay, so you look at the southeast portion of the county, it's rural residential, R1, R2 for, a good bit of it. There's a lot of ag out there. I don't want to discount that corner of that southeast corner as ag. But comments we're hearing are from folks just like me. We're not hearing it from the ag guys. So I guess we need to take that into consideration.
Everybody had the opportunity to speak.
Well, I'm just saying,
Okay, I'm still missing your point. Are you saying,
I'm saying the 500 from principal building is if I was looking at it, I'm going, okay. Because you're gonna measure from my house, in that example, the closest it was gonna be 300 feet. Or actually 200 feet from one side. So and of course, I'm sandwiched in by other R1s, R2s, so it'd be a little bit further than that, but on three of my borders, there would be that opportunity. One would be, with those three borders, the closest I would have would be 200 feet from my property line.
So you're okay with the 500 feet from,
But I'm using my situation as a reference. But it's something to think about as we look at this. This 500 feet from the principal building doesn't mean that in some cases, it could mean that it would only be 100 feet from the property line.
Right.
It could be. I'm not arguing that.
Yep.
But I'm just saying that I could not see that, my point through all of this is that 500 feet from the property line seems excessive.
I see what you're saying, but then I think back to what the people were saying that were here. And if they were to bring back their family to farm with them and build another house, I'm still saying that there could be it could be close to their house then. It could be less than the 500 feet.
Yes, it
And that
But see,
isn't really
but-
what they were wanting, I don't
But see,
think.
are we here to help them plan their future, or are we here to deal with the land use?
Well, I guess we're here to utilize our property as good as we can in Reno County.
I'm with you, but I
I just
guess,
want to cover my
I guess I
bases.
don't want planning for my neighbor's future to be landing at my feet either. I get it. I get that piece completely, but it's,
Our
It's a
primary
tough
goal
situation.
is land use, yes, but I also feel we have a secondary responsibility of protection of property owners' rights. you know, so, you know, those conflict once in a while.
Yes.
And, you know, in this case, I mean, I don't see the harm in going from a property line setback versus a building setback. Yeah, it's gonna maybe take a little ground away from the developer, but, you know, they, you know, I don't think that's that big a deal.
I could
And it's
go,
gonna protect the non-participating owner's property and give them, you know, more enjoyment and use of it.
though I have no qualms about going to the property line, but I'm not comfortable with 500 feet.
Well, you know, I mean, that's half of what most people have been asking for.
500 feet is too much.
Well,
from the property line.
The problem with 500 feet is, so say you've got a parcel of ground and you've got a second parcel in the center, like a house. With 500 feet on either side, you're now talking a quarter mile. So if you have an 80, you know, an east-west facing 80, and you got a sliver in the center with another house, and they take a quarter mile out, well, that really impedes on the owner of the 70 acre parcel. I mean, that really limits the amount that they can use, 500 feet on either side, because we're talking a quarter mile altogether.
But
So-
what is the likely, I mean, you gotta look at what is the likelihood that a solar project is gonna be so piecemealed that it's gonna jig in and out of these property lines. Most of the ones that I've ever seen are just giant squares or rectangles. You know, they don't, you know, have, you know, some here, some there, some everywhere. So it basically, you're looking at the, you know, I look at it as, you're looking at a setback on the side of a non-participating owner's property is what's gonna be affected.
Going back to my example, I'm in the corner of a long half-mile section, okay? So that my short side would be taking out of that sliver of that quarter mile. It's actually a quarter mile wide, full mile long. So if we took the 500 feet from the border, I would be dictating what my neighbor could not do with his property.
Yes,
Yep.
but on the flip side,
Now,
if he goes in.
that strip that I would be dictating, you know, for him, would disqualify at least a portion of his property that he had no control over.
For solar.
How would you feel if you were in his shoes and I disqualified you and you wanted it in the worst way?
Well, that's, you give and take. I mean, I don't, you know, I'm sorry, I don't,
He could pay you to waive it.
yeah, he can pay you to waive it if we put in a waiver provision.
So now you're paying people to use their own property the way they see fit.
I think the 500 feet from the principal building is adequate. If we were gonna change that to a property line,
How about 300?
probably,
Everybody knows what a football field is.
I would probably split that 500 in half.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to go that small. You know? I mean, I've been happy with the 500. I mean, if you had a house that was built 30 feet from the property line, then you just disqualified 470 feet of your joining property owner's land. You know, so what's the difference for another 30 feet? Just say it's from the property line.
I'm just saying
So, I mean, it just depends on where the house is located, where the setback goes.
and here again, I think, yeah, I don't know.
I just, you know, I look at it as trying to to help the non-participating people preserve their land rights and use.
I get it.
And-
Because I'd be one of them.
Yeah.
Because that little 500 by 700 piece is 9 acres. So there is not a chance a snowball's chance that I'll ever have a developer
Yeah.
come and knock on my door.
Yeah.
So am I okay with 200 feet from one of my property lines? Probably would be.
Probably would be, you would, yeah, in that circumstance.
So I can't speak for every circumstance, but I'm just saying, we can only speak to the experience that we have and what information we pull from that, and that's,
You know, you look at what everybody, you know, the people that were at the audience that were addressing it, the setbacks, they were all asking for 1,000 feet.
sure, they were asking for 5 miles.
Well, some were, yeah, but, yeah.
So
Well, that's
I guess we gotta
ridiculous,
find a happy medium
but
somewhere.
that's what I'm saying, you know, and, you know, I think the developer was wanting 200 feet. You know, 500 is a happy median between 1,000 and 200.
I'm looking at the Reno County Comprehensive Plan, and the first sentence under the purpose of the plan here says, comprehensive plan is intended to be the most visible part of the planning process for a community, setting the direction for the future growth and development of the community. And listening to the people talk and how much their community had grown, you know, you hate to put a pinch on people growth if you, coming into the community, if you don't have people, you're kind of killing a community. So we need to, you know, I think I did hear somebody say that the land, their thoughts was that the land could, if you were to use it for solar, it would be taking away from somewhere where somebody could build a house someday if they wanted, or, you know, that was a comment that I did hear. And, you know, if you're taking it away from the property line, and putting it even, I think, closer than, you know, 500 foot to me is, but we can, like, we're discussing that, but you might take out the possibility of somebody wanting to do that, put a house there and grow the school system or make a business in town.
I think that's where we have the opportunity for a specific project when we're going through the conditional use permit process. If there is an area that is growing, I don't know, are there areas like that in Reno County where our population's grown?
Sure. Yes.
Southeast corners, you're showing, you know, a lot of new growth there. That's
So-
the area we're looking at.
So if you have areas like that, then we can address those in the conditional use permit process. But there, you know, I'd argue there's areas in the zoned part of Reno County that are mostly farm ground. They've been mostly farm ground my whole life, or vacant ground, or places where people put abandoned trailers, and they probably will be for the next 50 years. And so if someone wants to put a solar project there, I personally don't want to get in their way within reason. So we're setting regulations for the entire zoned area or the entire county. I don't think we know exactly yet, do we?
We're doing
It's just the zoned area.
We're just doing, so we know,
Doing the zoned area.
so the unzoned area is completely
Not
off
on the-
limits
not
for
being
regulations?
discussed.
Okay.
Yep, or the,
So we're setting regulations for the entire zoned part of Reno County.
correct, which is the
Eastern part.
So not for one particular project or one particular neighborhood, right?
Correct, yeah.
So I think in that case, I understand the concern, but I don't think we want to get too restrictive for a policy that's covering a significant portion of the county.
I would throw out we talked a little earlier about leaving the 500 in there, but changing the provision to allow the non-participating owner to waive that. So if he's comfortable with it, but it being closer, then he can enter an agreement with the developer to waive that. Or the developer can, approach him to see if he would.
Is that for the principal building or the property
I'm
line?
sorry, saying from the property line.
Okay.
We change that to 500 feet from the property line, but allow the non-participating owner the option to waive that setback requirement. Then he has the flexibility to do what he wants.
I hate to leave it to the conditional use permit to set
I agree.
a farther, a bigger distance, because then as fairness, one's gonna say, well, you gave the guys last year 100 feet. Now, I'm 5 miles away. Why do I have to be 300 feet or 200 feet? I think it needs to be in the regulations that you give them. It's gonna be 500 or whatever we choose. So when they start planning it, they know what they're doing. They know what rules they need to meet.
I agree with that. Yeah, I think it should be a defined distance, and that way everybody knows going in what it is. And my preference, of course, is 500 feet.
Yeah.
When you say 500 feet, you're saying 500 feet from the property line?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's what I would love to see in there, yes. Yeah, give it a defined distance for, the landowners and the developers, gives the non-participating owners, some assurance that, they're not gonna have this thing right up against their fence line.
And then I listened to what my associate said here, that 500 feet is a tenth of a mile.
Exactly.
That's a long ways.
Well, it's not that far.
And so that leads me to lean over to what Russ said, is maybe there's a happy medium in there, 250 feet.
That's too close, in my opinion. $500 feet, if you go out and visualize, 3 telephone poles, that's about the distance, is what 500 feet is. So 1, 2, and 3, and that first and third pole, that's about 500 feet.
Raises the question in my mind, who takes care of that 500 feet? it's really not in our purveyance of what we have to decide here.
No.
But it sure is something to say, okay, am I gonna have 500 feet of pigweeds before the solar panels? Or am I gonna have a farmer that is a good steward of his land and is allowed to back in and put five drill passes a week in there?
Well, he's more apt to do 5 than 1.
I would guess.
That's right.
And you
That's
kind of
between them
already-
and the developer.
You kind of already have people that farm their ground good and people that don't farm their ground
Right.
good.
Yes.
So, I don't know, I still can't get past that 500 from a property line.
And I lean that same way, with 500
I
feet
think
from
it-
property line is too much.
Of course, I can't make the decision for how it's gonna be managed, but I
Nope.
just think of how, if it is 250 feet, the developer will be more apt to maintain that 250 feet than he will that 500. If that is an all-inclusive fence row to fence row agreement. Now, I'm just, there's a lot, we've been talking about a lot of what ifs, but these are some thoughts that are going around in my mind.
And, you know, that depends on the agreement between the landowner and the developer, how they work that out. And of course, they don't want anybody to know what's in those agreements. You know, it could be
Exactly.
that, you know, he allows the farmer to, you know, farm that ground, or they're gonna put it in, you know, grass and, you know, just let it be native grass for wildlife and whatnot, which would be good. Gives a good buffer around the solar project for development of wildlife.
For some reason or other, I think this, from the non-participating landowner's principal building, that's almost a spinoff of the discussions we had about wind.
It is. That's where we carried over from, I think, and, you know, I mean, just because that's, I think, what we used in wind, you know, I don't really feel that's what we need to use on solar. I really wasn't happy with that either, but, you know, we have a chance now to correct that, so to speak.
So, Mr. Chairman, maybe to get us off at dead center here is, I'm thinking to myself to move that item B be changed to 250 feet from the property line. Now, I didn't make that motion. I'm trying to get us off at dead center, moving forward.
Well, I'd entertain a motion. I will definitely entertain it. I'm just,
And then we can vote.
then we can,
And then we'll
then-
prove that there's an odd number of voters here.
Well, it'll do several things. One, it'll create conversation to amend a motion if there is one, and finally come into a decision.
So,
Okay, well, I'd like to make a motion then that the setback on item B, 2B, be set to be 500 feet from the non-participating landowner's property line, with giving the non-participating property owner the right to waive that setback.
I'll second it.
Been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
I have a question about fencing. Looking down at item 4, the solar energy system facility shall be enclosed by a perimeter fence. So suppose it depends on how the leases are written. Where's the perimeter gonna be?
That's where my statement was coming from. Where is that perimeter?
500 feet from the property line.
That's right. The way the motion reads, it would be 500 feet from the property line.
Yes.
So then that 500 feet to the property line would be the landowner's
That's,
right and responsibility?
That would be up to the developer and the landowner. But one would assume that would be that would be landowner's responsibility. One would assume.
We don't really say where the fence, I hate to open up another conversation, but we don't really say where the fence is to go.
I think that is probably correct, what Steve is saying, and, if based on the motion, 500 feet from the non-participating landowner's property line, that's where the fence would start.
500 feet in.
Yes.
So the panel per se, if it existed, would be 525 feet.
Well,
Wait, doesn't the regulations, aren't the setback requirements covering the solar panel location?
yep,
Not the project location.
it's just
It's just the actual panels themselves
Right. So the fence could be,
on the property line, right?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
We're not defining where the fence goes.
nope,
Or the security cameras, or the gate, or,
we do define where the fence goes.
It seems like the leases would be for the actual legal description of the tract of land, which would be the property line.
I think we just need to be focused on where, since our regulations state minimum distance for any solar panel, we need to stay at that this motion needs to reflect that. I don't think the fence is, at this point, part of the discussion.
Right. Complicates the matter.
It does. Is there any further discussion on this motion?
Can somebody repeat the motion?
Mr. Secretary?
So, I have the motion by Mr. Seltzer to have the setback be 500 feet from a non-participating landowner's property line. And then in addition to that, the landowner would have the right to waive the setback requirement. Non-participating, yeah. Non-participating property owner would have the right to waive that 500-foot setback from his property line. Correct?
That's what I have written down.
Yeah.
But with that language, the non-participating owner could waive the full 500 feet. And the solar panels would be right up at the property line.
That's correct.
And then they could
We don't want that.
well, and then they could turn around and sell their house.
Yeah.
Or abandon it.
Abandoned, yeah.
I mean, there's,
No, that,
Yeah.
we put the setback in there as a protection for them. If they want to waive that and put it right at, have the solar panels right up against their property, that's their choice. They're the landowner and they can make those decisions. They give them that option.
Is it given that a participating landowner could also waive that?
Yeah, but they don't, the participating landowner only has like 100-foot setback. And he can waive that.
so if we set a precedent of waiving setbacks in exchange of unknown consideration, does that open another Pandora's box of,
I don't think so. That's between the developer and the non-participating landowner. You know, depending on, you know, that owner's position on what he wants. So I guess it'd say give him the option if the developer wanted to put it closer than the 500 feet, and he was able to negotiate an agreement with non-participating owner to compensate him something for that.
Then he becomes a participating landowner.
Well, yeah.
In a fashion.
In a fashion, yeah, but, you know, he's gonna share the wealth a little bit, he'll get something out of it. Gives him the option to do that. So it's kind of a win-win for him. You know, if he doesn't want it, he's protected. If he says, well, I'd rather, you know, do something with, work with the developer, set that closer, then he can try to work an agreement with him.
Any further discussion on the motion? Staff, you would call a roll?
Schwertfeger,
Mark, you know my question? So just to make sure, and we vote, yes, it's going to be to change to
Change
what,
letter B.
what we permit, or what we,
Right.
okay.
To change letter B from 500 feet from the property line.
I just want to make sure.
It's all right, yep, you're fine.
Yes, I'll vote yes.
Strand,
No.
Schaefer,
no.
Seltzer,
Yes.
Macklin,
No.
Martin,
Yes.
Gertson.
No.
Motion failed.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'll just make that same motion again with a 400-foot setback.
Been moved. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Give Mark a chance to catch up here.
Same motion with the chance for the waiver,
Yep, yep.
400 foot.
Yep.
Okay. So in this case, if the house is under 100 feet away from a property line, they would actually, the setback would, in total, would be less than as it's written now, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so we're shrinking setbacks in some situations
Some
with this way.
situations you would.
Okay.
Staff, you would call the roll?
Schwertfeger,
Yes.
Strand,
No.
Schaefer,
No.
Seltzer,
Yes.
Macklin,
No.
Martin,
Yes.
Gertson.
No.
Motion failed.
Well, still trying to move forward. I'll remake the same motion with 250 feet.
Okay, it's been moved. Do we have a second? Motion dies for lack of second.
Chairman, I would move we retain the verbiage as is in the proposed regs.
Been moved that we keep the regs as written.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion?
Well, yeah, I was kind of circling back to our point at the beginning, and I don't know if I'm hearing correct, but it seems like we sort of like the 500 feet from a primary residence. At least I think that's important. But we're hung up on the linear thinking of property lines are just definable and, you know, a standard for setbacks. And I guess I'm thinking I need to let go of that standard in this situation out of respect for the 500 feet from an existing principal residence, which I heard that pretty loud and clear from public comments. You know, that buffer zone is important. And it's up to the developer to figure out how to comply with that. And we may complicate their planner's life a little bit, but maintaining the integrity of the 500 feet it is important to me. And so I'm going full circle there and thinking maybe as written is doable.
Any other discussion?
I think maybe we found out how we came to this conclusion the first time. Because we're trying to balance the needs and wants and rights of all the property owners, and there's going to be a compromise at some point. And I think the way it's written, at first glance, it does sound like that, well, you can put it right up to the property line of many places, but the way it's written actually protects the non-participating landowner's home in greater than a lot of our other alternatives that we saw tonight. So I hope we're gonna get another visual aid.
Russ's drawing skills here show why I prefer property lines, but you have, you know, multiple tracts of ground here, and, okay, you've got 500 feet from the house, property belt. Okay, got one here, got one here, got one here, 500 feet here, 500 feet here, 500 feet here. So the project has property line boundary.
The project may not have a curvy line, but the solar array.
Solar
Will have a
arrays,
curvy
yeah.
line. Okay, we're within the regulations there.
Yeah.
I mean, if the fence is right here,
Yeah,
but the array could have a curvy line.
yes.
Or the developer could say,
Yeah,
we'll have
We'll make it
larger
straight.
than 500 feet because we want a straight line.
We don't have straight
So
lines,
since
so
we're
you
drawing
do.
tonight, pardon me, I'm gonna join. I'm a very visual
We're gonna be the best artists.
Okay, so right now, so this is as written, right? So one of our other options that was presented was a 250-foot.
Permanent?
it
Oh,
says
is it?
grade erase.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah, it will.
okay, anyway, so our other options, one was a 250-foot from the property line,
Right.
correct? So that would have been just like that.
Right.
And then the other one was what, 400? Is that correct?
400, yeah.
400. So it would have been, somewhere like this, if I'm guessing. I'm not a math person, so don't hold me to that. But in reality, so this is as written here, the little squiggly line. It's kind of a funny looking line, but it's a way to maximize solar here while everybody still has their full 500-foot buffer. So while it sounds like a compromise, it seems like a really nice compromise to me. For everybody but the installer that has to follow the squiggly line, but
Yeah.
that's why they get paid the big bucks.
They'll follow their colored flags one way or another.
Yep, right. That's why they pay surveyors with flags, right?
Okay. Good discussion. Any more discussion on the motion?
What is the motion?
There is a
Just
motion?
retain
Yes,
the
there is.
existing
There is.
verbiage.
Oh, to
as-
retain.
Yeah,
It's
retain
been
it as it's written in the draft regulations.
Been moved and seconded. So we were discussing, in discussion phase. Any more discussion on that motion?
Are the pictures part of the official record?
Here's what I'm gonna take a picture of.
Can't be calling the carpet for our artistic ability.
That one's pretty good.
That is pretty good. Seeing no more discussion, staff call the roll, please.
Schwertfeger,
Yes.
Strand,
Yes.
Schaefer,
Yes.
Seltzer,
Yes.
Macklin,
Yes.
Martin,
Yeah.
Gertson.
Yes.
That was a long way around.
So, well, yeah, had to try, had to try.
I have another question that might be easier, I don't know. If we're still,
Yep.
Arc Valley, how do they fit into this proposed reg? What I heard her say was, you know, they have a cap on how big their projects can be, but in terms of this, they're gonna be a commercial install.
Exactly.
Going through the same regulations and process as a large commercial project.
Yeah, I share your point there, Garth. I did a little reading a little bit at like Harvey County and Butler County's regs, and they have a in-between provision called limited scale commercial solar developments for like co-ops and whatnot. Generally, they limit them to like 10 to 20 acres in size. But it's another subset, you know, they have their own kind of subset of rules and stuff. I haven't got into those. You know, I'm just gonna throw out that concept as if that's something we want to consider, because I know the Arc Valley, lady from Arc Valley had indicated they had one or two existing fields, and, you know, they're limited, but they're not maxed out. And what they would like to consider, you know, another one at some point, because it does generate a savings to the co-op members. And they are the users of that electricity. And I think that's something that would be worthwhile to look at, you know, putting a provision in for the limited scale, you know, facility.
But there isn't anything in there that prohibits them from doing a small one.
Aren't they considered a utility though?
They would be.
They are a utility.
So they would have to follow the entire
They'd have to-
regulation packet, right?
Exactly,
Still
exactly.
commercial.
Which for, you know, you're looking at, somebody, we would need for somebody that may be putting in 1,000 acre,
Right.
you know, solar system versus somebody who wants a 10-acre system. You know, do they need to jump through all those same hoops?
Yeah, because it looks like they have a proposed location on the back of their
Electricity.
Yeah.
letter they sent.
So
The ones in.
why are they limited?
What's
Is that, why are they limited? Is that a KCC deal or? Okay. How big is the one that we approved?
7.5 or 8 acres.
8 acres.
Okay.
Yeah, it's only like
Small.
8 acres, yeah.
I mean, I've driven out by the one out on West 4th Street. It's, I mean, you don't even know it's there if you weren't looking at it.
I guess I would expect our first applicant would be small. I don't expect somebody to come in here, build a 500 or 600 acre. but I don't know.
Well, it's unlikely, but it seems we're okay with a private install of 10 acres or 20 acres or, whatever somebody would be compelled to build. I guess I was having some empathy with this particular situation, the in-between need.
So, I mean, based on the current regulations, draft of the regulations, they would be considered a commercial, solar farm developer and have to comply with all provisions of that.
Right.
Now, if we went to added another category of limited scale solar development, which would apply to something like this for 10, 20 acre type sites, it allows them to put those in without all the hoops that the big systems are facing. As long as they're basically using that electricity that's being generated to service their customers. Now, I think the other counties I looked at did provide, if there is excess energy, some net metering where they could sell that to Evergy or somebody. But, that's not gonna be a big part of their income, because they're doing this to find a new source of power to distribute out to their members.
Weren't those, like Harvey County, wasn't that made for, it was for regulating private solar that was large enough to where they had metered?
I don't think it was.
I don't think it wasn't considered utility. It was considered
Let me see if I can find it
Which
here.
one?
for Harvey County.
It's renewable energy.
Then the scale solar systems, requirements, restrict, standards, regulations, visual impact. Site. Solar size there shall not exceed 10 acres. Site is cumulative total solar models and measured when the panels are in their utmost position. One of them I looked at, did specifically mention co-ops that allowed net metering.
Did we not cover the question on the qualified third-party company when we put that in on the REA companies? It says an independent individual or entity that is not allowed by, operated by, or subsidiary of a current owner or subsequent owners of a solar energy system or a private owner who is qualified. Okay, sorry. I thought we covered that earlier when we were saying that it was, that somebody it wasn't selling to outside of its own customers, like the REA company, we were gonna cover it. Did we take that out?
I don't think we have anything in there.
Didn't we talk about that at one time, about
I know we said that.
about them not, if they didn't sell it to like a line that takes it out of, then they were,
I think we were talking about commercial.
oh, I thought we were
Small
also
business.
about the REA, like the
No,
smaller
we're talking
REAs.
about commercial
Okay.
businesses. if
Okay,
they
I'm
put
sorry. I must have
solar to
misunderstood.
supplement their power service.
Okay, I was thinking,
And
sorry,
for
I'm
low
wrong.
leveling and that,
Yeah,
so that type.
yeah.
Okay,
But, yeah.
All right.
So, I mean, that is, I think that's something we should address, is in fairness to, like, the electric co-ops and whatnot. I think we only have, that's the only, I don't know if we have another one in the county or if that's the only one.
Pratt's, which is, Minnesota comes in a little bit too.
Just on the corner.
We have, and they do the, yeah, right up by the school, but not the school.
But that's in the unzoned area of the county.
Right,
so
it
it
is.
doesn't-
Yes,
Somebody
so you're
was,
right.
I think they're one of the last speakers at the public hearing from Cheney, and talked about their,
Oh, Sedgwick County Co-op? I think.
yeah,
Yeah,
I would assume they might have.
they might come over, I don't know if they come over into Reno County.
Just in the little corner there, yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah. But, you know, I just think in fairness to the electric co-ops, you know, they're usually small scale, and I don't think we should require that they jump through all the hoops that a large scale, you know, solar development would be doing. I would have to go through, I mean, that requires a whole new section of the regulations, I understand.
Yeah, I get where you're coming from. You need to make it easy for local guys to do business.
Exactly.
But I also think that if we muddy the water with a lot of regulations, we're gonna get caught.
Well, I don't think you're muddying the waters, you're clarifying, you know.
But we have a set of regulations that we've worked to this point for that fit, that I wouldn't call it a cookie cutter, but it fits most situations.
Yeah, all of my thinking has been, when we develop a set of plans, it should be regulations for 2 megawatts or 200 megawatts or more.
That's correct.
I don't think there's anything in there that would have stopped them from building the one they've already got, or the one they've got planned they haven't built yet. Maybe the setback from the road, but that's all.
They're pretty close to the road.
They're waiting on this to be finalized.
Yeah, it looks like their letter really directly addresses the current moratorium.
Yes.
So really, it seems like their biggest hangup from us is that we haven't made a decision yet.
Yep.
So, is there anything in our current regulations that would make a small 8-acre facility where the regulations would be too high of a bar? It would be too onerous for a small scale?
I don't believe there is. It's commercial or it's not commercial. It's commercial or it's private.
100, you just go right down to setbacks and just put, and instead of thinking 200 acres, think 10. Does 100 feet from a public road right of way and property lines, is that okay? 500 feet from a non-participating principal building. Yep. 25 feet from a fence associated, yep. Are they gonna put it up in a recorded easement? Nope. They're gonna consult with the easements? They probably will, since they're a utility company. All right.
I'd be thinking more about some of the studies.
That's what I'm looking at, is the cost of some of the other requirement studies, like on,
Environmental impact assessment.
page 25.5, you've got a report shall be conducted by qualified third-party company on existing environmental concerns and filed with conditional use permit application. Including but not limited to information regarding wildlife, native grass, vegetation, avian study with types of eagles, whooping cranes, other sensitive species, flora, vegetation species, threatened species, fauna, geoconservation, special flood hazards.
So a 10 acre project, we don't care if they're killing off quail habitat, or we don't, I mean, is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not saying that. I like
Just the cost
No,
of.
I want to promote quail habitat.
So how do we define that? that's a hard line.
I know
To
it
define.
is, I know.
Well, could the report, I mean, is that something, you know, I presume they have a contractor that's building this and they have their SWIPs and they had to buy the 10 acres. So are these reports just another couple of pages they insert
I don't know.
in that project?
I guess, what the easiest way to determine that would be to sit down with with the co-op personnel and say, okay, do you have any specific concerns about these? So how that might impact the development of your smaller system.
So within the process, we can waive it. In the conditional use process, conditional use permit process, we can waive that. Could we not? I mean, was that within our?
If it's written in the regulations,
I think that's a
I don't know.
That's a very
Can you
good
waive that, Mark?
question, yeah.
Well,
How slippery,
Typically, yes,
how
you can-
slippery of a slope would we be on?
Typically, you can waive it, but a lot of that stuff,
Precedent then.
is required at the time of submittal of the application.
Gotcha.
So,
Yeah.
I haven't gone through exactly and looked to see which ones are, which ones aren't, but that would be the risk you're running, is that a lot of these reports, will be.
Don't be the actual application.
Have it on the front side.
Yeah, so we
got
have
you.
it, so we have to review.
That's fair.
Because really, a majority of this is stuff that would be covered, they're talking about, they'll have plans signed and stamped by an engineer, so a lot of our basic requirements will be covered, just
Yeah.
a standard project plan. So it's really some of those other reports that you're talking about.
That's what I'm talking about, is it gonna, create a cost burden for them? I like getting that refund of capital credits, jeez.
Just want the cheaper electricity.
Yeah, all for that, whatever that is.
Maybe that's something we discuss at the next meeting. Kind of put our heads together, see if that's something we want to look at. We each do a little bit of research and see what that feels and looks like. I think this might be a good place to push pause.
Yes.
And so, just kind of point of order here, we just take another recess, is that how this will work to our?
Yeah, I think you just move to recess until whatever date, time, and place you would like to reconvene. So I guess that would be, that'd be your next
Next regular scheduled meeting in
task is
December.
December 21st. I think it's late this year.
If we're gonna do that, I guess I'd like to hear anybody else's hot buttons or concerns, just to have some processing time between now.
Also, that one that I've got that we haven't brought up yet is the Cheney / South Minnesota Watershed District. I would entertain proposing that we ban development within the boundaries of the watershed district. So that's something we can chew on.
That's a mouthful.
That is, yes.
How big is that watershed?
Well, Don just happens to.
Don, you've been sitting on
You should
this.
ask, Alan. It's pretty big.
I don't have the unzoned portion marked. So that's probably just like right here. From there over is the zoned area.
50 odd is in Reno.
So that's the whole thing in all of Reno County. But the far third would be the zoned area.
Coming down from
The
about
blue
Highway
area is
14.
all the,
That's all water, that's the Cheney watershed,
Yeah. All the water.
just in Reno County. Yeah.
North Fork and Minnesota watershed.
And you're talking about the third, eastern third,
In the zoned area.
Yep. Just about,
by now.
where the lake points up there, it's probably about 2 miles to the west of where
There's
the lake is.
There's roughly a 3 mile zone bubble around Cheney Reservoir.
Yeah, so if you match, I can't remember if you matched the wind or not, if you had that 3-mile zone around the lake, that almost encompasses this watershed. And everything,
But I don't think we have that 3-mile
I can't
buffer
remember.
in the regs.
I can't
We
remember.
did in the solar reg, or in the wind regs, but I don't think we put it in this.
No, what I'm saying is the line of the zone is 3 miles around the
Oh.
perimeter of the lake,
Yeah,
around the west side and up over the north to the northeast corner, and then it makes a northerly pass up to approximately west of Haven and jogs over and then goes north into Hutch.
The next map, next time we have this meeting, I'll have all that.
Something to chew on.
yeah.
Just to let you know.
You wanted something, Garth? Now you got it.
I was prepared.
I knew Don had that map, so
I know, I've been watching it over there.
I'll have many more.
Okay, Chair will entertain I'll help whoever wants to make the motion for recess. That'll be our next scheduled meeting, December 21 at 4:30 here at the Public Works Facility.
So moved.
Oh,
He who hesitates. Second.
well, I had one, somebody second it?
Not yet.
We just have discussion items.
Okay.
One other thing I had on my list was the disposal requirement of solar panels.
What?
Disposal requirement.
Okay.
I heard that a lot from the public comments about, concern about landfill, which I can't say I agree with, but if that is true, I think we could address that and incorporate a disposal requirement in this and say they don't go to the Reno County landfill. I mean, they are being recycled, so there's outlets for them, but it would prevent a dump of, if there was a really bad weather event and they had to replace all the panels or a large part of them. I guess I would like to protect our landfill to some degree, just from a volume perspective.
Okay. Motion to recess is on the table still.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to recess. All in favor of recessing until December 21st, 4:30 here at the Public Works Building, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.